Hey guys, welcome to Kids Church. Last week we had our Kids Church family service and we learned about how God's people got taken away from their home in the Promised Land and they had to go to a place called Babylon. And they thought, is this the end? Is this the end of God's great big story? But spoiler alert, it wasn't the end, and today we're going to learn about what happened next. So let's remind ourselves of the story so far, and then Jane is going to tell us the next part of the story. Are you ready? Creation, fall, flood, promise, family, Egypt, slavery, freedom, 10 commandments, spying, conquering, judges, welcoming. We want a king. David, God's house, prophets speak. Is this the end?
Last week, we heard how the people of Israel, the Jews, had been taken from their home country to another land, Babylon. Life in Babylon was very different. Different language, different food, different ways of doing things. But the king of the country wanted some of them to learn about these new ways. It was a group of friends who had been chosen, and one of them was Daniel. But these young men were determined to remember their Jewish background and to continue to worship the one true God of Israel while they learned about Babylon. All through their training, Daniel and his friends trusted God. They were clever and wise, and soon the king promoted them to important positions in the land. This made the Babylonian officials very jealous, and they tried to find ways to get rid of them. But God was always with Daniel and his friends. Some years later, a king from another country invaded Babylon. This king could see how clever Daniel was and planned to put him in charge of the kingdom. This made the officials even more jealous. They realized that the only way to trap Daniel would be to try to stop him worshipping God. They persuaded the king to make a new law that said for the next 30 days, everyone must only worship the king. The punishment would be to be thrown into a den of lions. Well, Daniel wasn't going to worship the king. Just as he always did, he went home, knelt by his window, and 3 times a day he prayed to his God. The officials could see him at the window and told the king. The king liked Daniel and was sad to hear what the officials had said, but he had made the law. He wanted to rescue Daniel, but the officials reminded him of what he had said. So Daniel was brought and thrown into the den of lions. As he was pushed in, the king called out, "May your God rescue you." A big stone covered the entrance to the den, and it was sealed shut. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He tossed and he turned, and as soon as it was light, he hurried to the den and called out, "Daniel, Daniel, I know you worship the living God. Has he rescued you?" He was delighted when Daniel replied, "God shut the lions' mouths. They haven't hurt me." The king ordered that Daniel be lifted out. He was completely unharmed. The king then ordered that the jealous officials be thrown into the den, and the hungry lions instantly killed them. The king then made another law which was sent throughout his kingdom. He said that everyone must respect the God of Daniel. He said, "His kingdom will never end. His power will last forever. He rescues and protects his people." Daniel and his friends trusted God however difficult life was for them. You can read more of their story in Daniel's book in the Old Testament of the Bible.
Wow. Wow, Jane, thank you so much for sharing this part of Daniel's story with us. Guys, if you have a look at the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, this story about Daniel in the lion's den is one story, and there are other stories as well about Daniel and his friends and all of God's people. Last week we learnt about how they got taken away from their home in the Promised Land and they went into exile in Babylon. And we asked the question, is this the end? But for Daniel and his friends, even though the people around them wanted them to live differently, wanted them to forget God, and wanted them to live in the ways of the Babylonians, they said no. God is our God and we are God's people and we're going to live God's way. And that's why Daniel prayed, even though it got him into trouble with the king. And Daniel and his friends, they refused to worship the king. They said, we're going to worship God. They lived God's way, even when the people around them didn't live that way, even when the people around them didn't want them to live that way. They made life really difficult for them. And we can learn from them. We also, the Bible says, are living far from home. Remember last week how we learned about the fact that the Bible says our real home is in heaven with God. Paul in the New Testament says that we're citizens of heaven. So it's kind of like we're on a bit of a holiday. We're in a temporary place here. So in this world, we need to remember that our real home is with God and we need to live His way for Him, even when people around us don't choose to do that. And so what we're going to do this morning to help us to be like Daniel and his friends, to help us remember to live God's way, even when other people around us don't, we're going to make some passports to remind us of where we're really from, to remind us that we belong to God, we are God's people, and our real home is with Him. So here we go, this is my passport, and on the front it says where I'm from, where I'm a citizen of. I'm not going to show you inside on a video, but on the inside it has a picture of me and it says my name and where I was born and when I was born. So we're going to make our own passport. So I've got some paper. So on the inside I am going to draw a picture of me here and I'm going to write my name and where I'm from. And then, should we draw a picture? Now I hope you can draw a better picture of yourself than I can. But you can write your name and where you're from, you can put your birthday if you want to. And then on the front, this is the really important bit. So remember, on my real passport, it says United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, because that is where I'm a citizen of. But remember, God says that really we are citizens of heaven. We belong to God. And so, what we need to do is put on the front of our passport something to tell everybody that we are a citizen of heaven and that we belong to God. Now, I'm not quite sure how to draw that, so I'm going to have a go. And I'm going to draw some things that remind me of God. And I'm going to draw a big smiley face because God gives me a lot of joy. So this is my passport to remind me that I belong to God. Wherever I am, I can live God's way like Daniel did. A lovely picture of me and my name and where I'm from inside. So shall we add on this part to God's great big story? We learned last week about God's people in exile and they said, is this the end? But Daniel knew that this was not the end. In fact, Daniel had some really cool dreams and visions that God gave him about what was going to happen in the future. And we're going to learn next week about the next part of the story. So obviously it's not the end. So we're going to say it's not the end. Shall we start from the beginning? Creation, fall, flood, promise, family, Egypt, slavery, freedom, 10 commandments, spying, conquering, judges, welcoming. We want a king, David, God's house, prophets speak. Is this the end? It's not the end. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you soon.